Alright, what's up guys? It's Carney. Fellas, great to see you. Ladies, it is fantastic to see you. Okay, so today we're going to talk about how to improve your transitions in your music. One of my favorite songs that I listened to last year was on my top 50 or whatever, was by Denzel Curry, produced by Kenny Beats. I'm a big fan of Denzel and Kenny. I have the Louis shirt on right now. I was at the pop-up shop. Where were you? I happen to live near LA. If you don't live, I shouldn't have made you feel bad about that. I'm sorry. Anyway, in the song, I heard some really cool transition stuff that made me think, and I applied it to a beat that I made with the SK1 from Mars. If you've seen any of my previous videos, you probably heard me mention, or maybe you watched one of the videos in the series, I bought the samples from Mars everything bundle and just didn't learn how to use any of it. So now I'm going through each instrument individually and trying to figure out what they all sound like, so I have them in my arsenal. Transitions are one of the most important parts of a production. They are a really underrated element of setting the tone of a song. So I think it's something we should all be thinking about more. And with that said, let's just jump into it. So let's kind of talk about the theory of transitions in music. In most songs, in any genre, it's the drums or the percussion that's kind of gonna signify where the transition is. If you're like me, before you were in a DAW trying to produce things, you were playing an instrument. I played a lot of instruments growing up. I played in church, I played in bands and stuff. So my understanding of production and song form and all that stuff is always kind of gonna be somewhat informed by that rock band setup of two guitars, a bass, and a drummer sort of thing. And at the most baseline level, when you're learning about drums and stuff, you learn that your crash cymbal is how you tell your listener that you're going to another section. So in the verse, you're hitting the hi-hat, and then it's 1, 2, 3, 4, crash. Now you're on the ride. 1, 2, 3, 4, crash, back to the hat. And like I said, it happens in every genre. If you think of EDM stuff, you'll hear a lot of impacts or fallers, but when you hear it, it's just kind of a white noise, and at its core, that's kind of just another version of a crash. Most impacts in most music are just different versions of a crash. So I started thinking about this after listening to by Denzel Curry, because there was a really cool kind of transitional piece that I had never really heard something like this used as, the signifier that we're in the next section. And yeah, I just wouldn't have expected it, but I thought it was really cool. Here's that. Yeah, not a crash, a drum roll, which leads us to tip number 1. That's right, it does not have to be a crash at all. That drum roll still shows the listener that we are in a new section and the song is moving forward, but it's not a cymbal. And you can play with this in a lot of different ways. That drum roll is cool. It could be a tom fill or something like that, or maybe it could be a tambourine and goes shh, and there's a delay on it or something. I don't know. The possibilities are kind of endless once you get out of that, rock band mindset of cool, well, the drummer's the one who takes us to the next section. What would the drummer do? And don't get me wrong, that setup definitely still works. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But there is room for all that classic stuff and also for new things that you can get from different genres of music and also just from, just things that come up in your head. You gotta be willing to try new things with your percussion, regardless of whether it's a transition or not. But that actually leads me to tip number 2. Yeah, it doesn't have to be percussion. There's a lot of different ways to transition things in a song. If we take this concept kind of to the next step, let's check out the beat that I made with the SK1. I started with having all the transitions be a crash, kind of like I was just saying, that was just where my head normally goes. And I used it 3 times in this beat. The first crash took us from the intro into the verse, the second crash took us from halftime to full time, and then the third one actually wasn't really a transition, it kind of was just a little punch on a sequencing thing I did. So looking at the first one, I just got to it and I was I just don't really think this sounds that good. So I thought, what could I do to make this drop feel really big? So I just did 5 layers of my voice and just went oh! And I think that turned out really good. It kind of reminded me of in Shake Your Rump by Beastie Boys, that one thing. I mean, that one admittedly is a lot crazier, but you get the point. So here's the original transition with the crash. And then here's the one with the O. So for the second one, I listened to it and I was this one really doesn't sound good. It just the way it was stretched, it just didn't work. And I tried to put a delay on it. It's just, Mini tip, don't be afraid to delete things. Because before I did the O and before I did this transition, I was like, do I really want to go back and like change this stuff? Because I had put a pretty significant amount of time into this beat. And then both of these things took me like less than 10 minutes to do. So please, just delete stuff. Don't be afraid to start over on some things. Okay, back into the main tip. I really did not like how that second crash sounded, so I was like, well, I don't want to just do the O's again, because I think that kind of like worked more for the vibe of the first verse. So I just went like, check, and then I pitched that up and added a delay on that, and that was how I went into the full-time part. So here that is with the crash. And then here it is with the check. And then side note, for the part after this, it's kind of like the breakdown to end the song, I used that check thing again. And I think it filled things out in a pretty cool way. So even when you think of transitions in this way, rather than just like, yeah, cool, just like throw like a psh or like a crash or something, you might be able to kill two birds with one stone. Key to that, of course, is small birds, large stone. So immediately this beat is cooler in my opinion, because every time we go into a new section, there's something that can't be replicated. Every transition is completely unique because in this case, it's all my voice. Only I have my voice. So this de facto, all those sounds are gonna sound like they came from a Carney beat rather than just like some random pack on Splice. So this is also like a cool way to start trying to like build whatever your sound is. For me, I've always been a singer, so I just use my voice on a lot of stuff. And then we come to tip number 3. This is kind of like an anti-tip, or maybe it's not, I don't know, whatever. Anyway, tip number 3. Most people kind of have this notion that every single transition has to come on the downbeat of the new section. And admittedly, that is how it is most of the time for most of music history in most music, but I would argue a lot or most transitions in whatever genre could benefit from having like a lead up into it that either happens like instead of an impact on the downbeat or is like leading up and like goes into the impact on the downbeat. And this is one that I kind of learned, again, watching Kenny, but watching specifically like the Fleeko summary streams, the ones where it's like, Kenny makes a hard beat from scratch, then deletes it. Like those types of videos. And you can hear it in like actual tracks that he's produced too, but like this is just where I noticed it first. If we look at all the transitions that I did in this beat, they all have something before that adds to the punch when the actual impact happens. On the first one, it's the dropout of all the instruments and the little hat that's panned. On the second one, it's a reverse of the crash that was originally there and a little snare fill. And on the third one, it's just the snare fill. And this part may be more subjective, like this is just my opinion, but honestly, when I like listen to this beat critically, I feel like all those things that lead up are kind of more important than the impacts themselves. And that may or may not be true. That's just kind of like a feeling I get, but like for the beginning, if I could only have the oh or the dropout and the hi-hat before, I really do think that dropout and hi-hat adds more to the dynamic of the song. But the good news is, you don't have to pick. You could just do both if you want. You are free to use them together or separately. I give you permission to do that. Okay, in conclusion, as I said in the beginning, your transitions are very, very important. You should treat them as such. And hopefully this was helpful to kind of like conceptualize what making different types of transitions can look like, seeing them in a real world context of like an actual like produced song by a big artist, as well as just like something that I made in this room right here. Just get out of like any like norms of like, well, I'm supposed to do that. No, that's stupid. Like try to have a freaking like rooster crowing as your thing. I take that back. That is a horrible idea. Have an engine revving as one of your transitions. There's probably a few songs where that might be able to work. Anyway, you get what I'm saying, man. It's like I just said, it's all rock and roll. There's no rules in music or in life. Just go try stuff. And if all else fails, just use a delay throw. It works literally every time. All right, well, if you have any questions or comments about this kind of idea or just music stuff in general, feel free to put them in the comments. Feel free to put them in the comments. And if you have any concerns about my personal well-being, you're welcome to put them down there too. I probably won't answer those because you don't want to hear the answer. Anyway, again, I hope this was helpful. I hope you guys are having a good day. I hope you have a good week. I hope we're still It's early in the year. We're gonna have a good year, okay, guys? If you want to listen to the whole beat that I made that you've been hearing this whole video, I'm gonna play that right now here at the end, and I'll have the link to this on SoundCloud as well as the other two samples from Mars things from this project, the beats that I made with the two other instruments as well. So that whole playlist will be down below. Also, you could go to Spotify and stream my actual music that I spent a lot of money on and worked really hard on, you know, if it tickles your fancy. You guys have a good one, fellas. I'll see you in the next one, and say something nice to the ladies on the way out.